So there's a concept in dinking that I think is very misunderstood. We hear all different kinds of stuff. We hear your dink should only come from the shoulder. You don't want to use any wrist. Lock your elbow, lock your wrist. So which is it? All this different information. What is actually right for you? Well, in this video today, we're clearing all of that up. So as an instructor, I've always been a big believer that you need to understand the whole of something to really be good at it or really get the full concept of it. So if I were to tell you that when you're dinking, I only want you to dink from the shoulder and go like this, but I don't give you any reference to why I want you to do that, then it's gonna be hard for you to grasp and hard for you to understand why you're doing. So what I wanna do today is I wanna go over all the different hinges that we have: shoulder, elbow, wrist, waist, knees. We've got all these hinges in our body. We're gonna go over all of them, kind of what purpose they serve, when you should be using them, when you should be locking them. And hopefully with all that information, you can understand how you wanna introduce this into your own pickleball game and what's comfortable for you. You subscribe so you can not only watch all my past videos, but see everything that I've got coming in the future. Okay, so we're gonna go over 5 different body hinges today. There's more, but these are the 5 that kind of play a key role in you being able to successfully hit a pickleball. We're gonna talk about each one. We're gonna talk about when you should use it, if you should use it at all, and if you shouldn't use it. So first we got the shoulder joint. So this is the common one we hear we should be using for dinking. We hear lock your wrist, lock your elbow, just dink from the shoulder. So that's shoulder. Next, we got the elbow. So we got that hinge. Then we got the wrist. In general, the closer you get to the paddle, the more a hinge is gonna have impact on that. So if I move my wrist, it's gonna affect the paddle more than if I move my shoulder. The last 2 are gonna be our waist, so this hinge here, and our knees. So those are our 5. Let's get into which we're using, which we're not, and when. Okay, so let's start lower body first. Let's start with the waist hinge, so this hinge here. So first we want a general understanding that all of these hinges are gonna have an effect on the paddle face, okay? So if I set my paddle face in a specific position, obviously my wrist, my elbow, my shoulder, and even my bending at the waist has an effect on where the paddle face was and what it's doing. So let's talk about our lower body hinges first and how they're gonna impact that. First, we got knees. This is the one hinge that, if done properly, is not gonna affect the paddle face. It's just gonna raise and lower the height of it. So if I do this, you can see my paddle face is not affected. I'm just getting lower. So when we need to get down low for the dink, this is what we wanna use. We wanna use those knees as the hinge, bend nice and low, because now I can get down to that ball without affecting my paddle face. The second one is the kind of waist. This is a hinge that we basically never want to use. So if I use this hinge to get down for that low ball, you can see that my paddle face is dramatically affected, okay? So when I go down low using this, I've now changed the paddle face, and guess what? When I go back up, I'm changing it more. You have to check this out. This is called a beezer ball, and it has become a staple of my training. It's about the size of a golf ball, and it's a little more rubbery than a pickleball, so it's not gonna break. This is obviously smaller and a little bit faster than a regular pickleball. You can do all the normal things that you would do in your training. You can do your dinking drills, your hands, even play regular games. And what this is gonna do is it's gonna play a little bit quicker, and because it's smaller, you're gonna have to focus on the ball a little bit more. Every movement you make with the paddle is gonna be amplified as far as how the ball responds. And that way, when you go back to a regular pickleball, you're gonna feel like you've got a ton of touch. You feel like you can do anything with the ball. So if you wanna try these for yourself, make sure to use my code and get yourself some of these to really up your training regimen. Okay, so let's talk upper body now. We got shoulder, elbow, wrist. In general, the main rule that I want you to follow is we're not gonna use multiple hinges for the same shot. So it's actually okay to use your wrist, to use your elbow a little bit on certain shots, to use your shoulder. But where we get into some major problems is when I'm using all of those hinges at the same time. If my elbow's bending, my wrist is moving, my shoulder's working, that's multiplying kind of the movements of the paddle, and it's gonna be almost impossible to have a repeatable paddle motion if I've got multiple hinges all trying to activate at the same time. So let's narrow this down even a little bit more. Some specific shots. If we're hitting more of a slice dink style shot, so backhand or forehand, generally what we're gonna wanna do for that is we're gonna wanna lock the wrist, we're gonna wanna lock the elbow, and this is gonna be a shoulder only hinge. So no waist, no elbow, no wrist, it's shoulder only. And now we're getting a nice steady kind of paddle face because we're not getting multiple hinging movements. If you're trying to do a topspin dink or a topspin drop, it's gonna be a very different process. If I just tried to do shoulder only, I'm not gonna get a great result of that. I'm not gonna get a lot of topspin. And this is gonna be more actually at the elbow. So if I'm trying to hit a topspin rolling forehand dink, it's actually gonna be just more elbow hinge like that. I get under that ball and I'm mostly hinging at the elbow to get that paddle to roll up. You can get a similar effect by just using wrist. You'll see some pro players that are kind of more wrist heavy. So if I lock both and I just use wrist, I can get a similar effect. In general, as you get closer to the paddle, you're gonna need more feel for the ball. It's gonna be a little more difficult. Generally, you're gonna see higher level players that are using a little bit of wrist for this type of shot. But again, if you start to practice this, understanding that if we isolate one, you're gonna have more feel. So a lot of those wrist issues come from having multiple hinges. If we learn to isolate and just do wrist, you're gonna find that you can actually have some pretty good feel for the ball. And this is how we're gonna learn our roll volleys and a lot of different shots. So what I want you to get out of this is dinking is not a one size fits all thing. There's not one way to do it. If you watch 20 top pro players, you're probably gonna see roughly 15 different dinking styles. Everyone's got their little nuance, okay? So now that you have all this information, you're gonna take your screenshot that's on the screen right now, you're gonna head to the court, and I want you to figure out what style feels the best for you. But again, we need to isolate. We need to isolate these movements to really feel what's going on. If we're trying to hit with everything hinging, it's not gonna work. So we gotta figure out which hinge feels right to you, and ultimately, how can we make these motions repeatable? Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to grab your screenshot on the screen right now. So next time you show up to the court, you know exactly what you need to do.